The fluorescent lights in St. Mary's Hospital buzzed like angry wasps above my head as I sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair, staring at the monitors surrounding my mother's bed. The steady beep 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 of her heart rate was the only sound that mattered in a world that had suddenly gone silent. Everything else, the hushed conversations of nurses, the distant announcements over the intercom, the squeak of wheels on linoleum, faded into white noise. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Mom looked so small in that bed, dwarfed by the machines keeping her alive. Her silver hair, usually perfectly styled for her job at the county clerk's office, lay flat against the pillow. Her face, normally animated with laughter or concern, was slack and peaceful in unconsciousness. The stroke had hit her 3 days ago while she was making breakfast, and I hadn't left her side since. "Elena, you need to eat something." I looked up to see my husband Marcus standing in the doorway, holding a paper bag from the hospital cafeteria. His tall frame filled the entrance, his expensive suit somehow still crisp despite spending the last few days here with me. Well, not exactly with me. More like appearing periodically to check his phone and remind me of my various failings as a wife. "I'm not hungry," I said, turning back to Mom. Her breathing was shallow but steady. "The doctor said the next few days would be critical." Marcus sighed dramatically and stepped into the room, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the floor. "This is ridiculous, Elena. You're going to make yourself sick sitting here like some kind of martyr." I bit back my first response and tried to keep my voice level. "She's my mother, Marcus. Where else would I be? Maybe at home, taking care of your actual responsibilities?" He set the bag on the rolling table with more force than necessary. "The house is a disaster. I had to order takeout again last night because you weren't there to cook. And don't even get me started on the laundry situation." The familiar knot of tension formed in my stomach. Even here, even now, it was about his needs, his convenience. "Your mother just had a stroke, Marcus. I think dirty laundry can wait." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "My mother?" His voice rose slightly before he caught himself, glancing around to make sure no one had heard. "She's your mother, Elena. And while I understand you're upset, you can't just abandon your duties as a wife because of a medical emergency." I stared at him, feeling something crack inside my chest. "A medical emergency? Marcus, she might die." He had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable, adjusting his tie, the gold one I'd given him for our anniversary last year. "Look, I'm not saying you can't visit her. But you need to prioritize. We have a dinner party this Saturday with the Hendersons, and the house needs to be perfect. You know how important this promotion is to me." The machines continued their electronic symphony around us while I processed his words. For 8 years of marriage, I'd been hearing variations of the same speech. My needs, my feelings, my emergencies were always secondary to his career, his image, his comfort. I'd gradually learned to make myself smaller, quieter, more accommodating, until sometimes I forgot I existed at all outside of his requirements. "The dinner party," I repeated slowly. "Yes, the dinner party. Tom Henderson is basically guaranteed to be the next department head, and if I can get in his good graces." Marcus was already planning, his hands gesturing as he spoke. He did this when he was excited about work, becoming animated in a way he never was when talking to me about anything else. I watched his face as he outlined his strategy for impressing his boss, and I saw a stranger. When had I stopped recognizing the man I married? Or maybe the real question was, when had I started pretending he was someone else? "Elena, are you even listening to me?" I blinked, refocusing on his irritated expression. "Sorry. What did you say?" "I said you need to be home by Thursday to start preparations. The grocery shopping, cleaning, menu planning, all of it. I can't have Tom Henderson seeing our house looking like a college dorm." Something twisted in my chest, hot and sharp. "Our house?" "Yes, our house. The one you're supposed to be maintaining while I work 60-hour weeks to pay for it." Marcus checked his Rolex, another anniversary gift from me, bought with money I'd saved from my part-time job at the library. "Look, I need to get back to the office. Crisis at the Peterson account." He leaned down to kiss my forehead, a perfunctory gesture that felt more like a dismissal than affection. "I'll see you at home tonight. Try not to stay too late." And then he was gone, leaving behind the faint scent of his cologne and a silence that felt heavier than before. I sat there for a long time, watching Mom's chest rise and fall, thinking about the word respect. It was funny how you could live with someone for years and never really understand how they saw you until a moment like this stripped everything bare. "Elena?" I turned to see Dr. Williams entering the room, her expression serious but not alarming. She was a small woman with kind eyes who'd been Mom's doctor since her admission. "How is she?" I asked, standing up too quickly and having to steady myself against the chair. "Stable. Her vitals are good, and the swelling in her brain is starting to reduce. We're cautiously optimistic." Dr. Williams moved to check the monitors, making notes on her tablet. "Have you been here all night again?" I nodded, suddenly aware of how I must look. 3 days in the same clothes, hair unwashed, surviving on vending machine coffee and whatever food well-meaning nurses brought me. "Elena, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." Dr. Williams sat down in the chair next to mine, her voice gentle but firm. "When was the last time you went home? Really went home, not just to shower and change clothes?" I thought about it. "Sunday night, I think. Before all this happened. That's 3 days ago. You need rest, real food, a proper shower. Your mother is going to need you to be strong when she wakes up, and you can't do that if you collapse from exhaustion." "I can't leave her," I said, the words coming out smaller than I intended. "What if something happens? What if she wakes up and I'm not here?" Dr. Williams studied my face with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen family members destroy themselves with worry. "Elena, can I ask you something else? Are you staying here because your mother needs you, or because you need to be needed?" The question hit me like cold water. I opened my mouth to protest, to insist it was entirely about Mom, but the words wouldn't come. "There's a difference," Dr. Williams continued softly, "between caring for someone and hiding from your own life. And sometimes, the people who love us most can see which one we're doing, even when we can't." I looked back at Mom, and for just a moment, I could have sworn I saw her eyes flutter. But when I leaned closer, she was still unconscious, still lost in whatever place her mind had retreated to after the stroke. "She's going to be okay," Dr. Williams said, standing up. "But you need to take care of yourself too. That's not selfish, Elena. That's necessary." After she left, I sat alone with my thoughts and the steady rhythm of the machines. Outside the window, I could see the parking lot where Marcus had driven away in his BMW, the car I'd helped him pick out, using the inheritance from my grandmother. That I'd never told him about. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Remember what I said about Thursday? The Hendersons are important. Don't let me down." I stared at the screen until the words blurred together. "Don't let me down." As if my mother's medical emergency was somehow a personal failing on my part, an inconvenience I'd chosen to inflict on his carefully ordered world. I thought about Dr. Williams' question. Was I staying here because Mom needed me, or because I needed to be needed? The truth was probably both. In this hospital room, my presence mattered. The nurses knew my name, asked my opinion about Mom's care, treated me like someone whose thoughts and feelings were important. When was the last time I'd felt that way at home? The sun was setting outside, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded me of the watercolors Mom used to paint when I was little. She'd had dreams once, of art school, of traveling, of opening her own gallery. Instead, she'd spent 30 years filing documents and helping people with marriage licenses and birth certificates and all the paperwork that marked the important moments of their lives. "What would you do, Mom?" I whispered to her still form. "If you could do it all over again, what would you choose?" The machines beeped their steady response, but I thought I heard something else in the silence. A whisper of possibility, a suggestion. That maybe it wasn't too late for either of us to find a different path. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Marcus, stopped by the house. "It's a mess. This needs to be fixed by tomorrow." I turned off the phone and slipped it into my purse. Tomorrow felt very far away, and for the first time in years, I wasn't sure I wanted to reach it as the same person I'd been today. Outside, the last light was fading from the sky, and in the growing darkness, I began to imagine what it might feel like to disappear entirely, not from Mom's bedside, but from the life that was waiting for me beyond these hospital walls. The life where I was small and quiet and grateful for any attention, even when it came wrapped in criticism and disappointment. Maybe Dr. Williams was right. Maybe I was hiding. But if so, I was beginning to think I had good reason to hide. The real question was, what would I find if I stopped running and turned around to face what I'd been hiding from? As if in response to my thoughts, Mom's fingers twitched against the hospital blanket. Just once, barely visible, but enough to make my heart race with hope and terror in equal measure. Change was coming, whether I was ready or not. The morning arrived with a vengeance, dragging me from a restless sleep in the hospital chair. My neck screamed in protest as I straightened, and for a moment I couldn't remember where I was. Then I saw Mom's face, still peaceful but somehow more present than yesterday, and everything came flooding back. "Good morning, Elena." I turned to find a new nurse checking Mom's for, a woman about my age with kind brown eyes and prematurely gray hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her name tag read, Carmen, RN. "Any changes?" I asked, my voice hoarse from sleep. Her brain activity showed some promising signs overnight. "Dr. Williams will be in around 8 to discuss it with you." Carmen finished with the 4 and turned to me with a gentle smile. "Can I get you some coffee?" Real coffee, not the vending machine swill. I nodded gratefully, suddenly aware of how desperately I needed caffeine. "That would be amazing. I'll be right back." "And Elena?" She paused at the doorway. "Your mother spoke your name twice during the night shift. She's fighting to come back to you." After Carmen left, I sat with those words, feeling something warm unfurl in my chest. Mom was fighting. Maybe I should be fighting too, instead of just existing in this strange limbo between my old life and whatever came next. My phone had 17 missed calls and twice as many text messages. I scrolled through them with growing dread. Marcus, of course, but also his mother Patricia, my sister Rosa in California, and several numbers I didn't recognize. Marcus's messages started demanding and grew increasingly angry. "Where are you? House is still a disaster, Elena. This is unacceptable. Call me immediately. I don't care what's happening with your mother. You have responsibilities here. If you're not home by noon, there will be consequences." The last one had been sent at 2 a.m. Consequences. Like I was a child being threatened with punishment instead of a wife dealing with a family crisis. Patricia's messages were equally charming. "Marcus tells me you've abandoned your duties to play nursemaid. This is very selfish of you, Elena. A good wife supports her husband's career. Your mother has plenty of other people to look after her. You're embarrassing our family with this dramatic behavior." I almost laughed at that last one. Patricia had never included me in our family, except when it came to criticism. For 8 years, I'd been the daughter-in-law who wasn't quite good enough, not successful enough, not social enough, not pregnant enough to satisfy her vision of what Marcus deserved. Rosa's messages were different, worried rather than angry. "Mija, I saw your Facebook post about Mom. Why didn't you call me sooner? I'm trying to get a flight but everything's booked. Can you give me an update, Elena? Please call me. I'm scared." The guilt hit me immediately. I'd been so focused on Marcus's selfishness that I'd forgotten to keep my sister informed. Rosa lived in San Diego with her husband and twin boys, building the kind of loving family I'd once imagined for myself. Carmen returned with a steaming cup of coffee that smelled like heaven. "Real cream and sugar," she said, settling into the chair beside me. "You look like you could use the calories." "Thank you." I took a sip and closed my eyes in appreciation. "This is perfect." "Rough night with the phone?" Carmen nodded toward my cell, which had started buzzing again. I glanced at the screen. "Marcus. Again. My husband isn't handling this well." Carmen's expression shifted slightly, becoming more alert. "How so?" Something in her tone made me look at her more carefully. There was a professional distance there now, the look of someone trained to recognize certain patterns. "He thinks I'm being dramatic. Staying here instead of taking care of the house and his needs." The words came out flat, matter of fact, but saying them aloud made them sound even worse than they felt. "And what do you think?" It was such a simple question, but I realized no one had asked me that in years. What did I think? What did I want? When had I stopped having opinions that mattered? "I think." I paused, surprised by the words that wanted to come out. "I think he doesn't understand what love looks like." Carmen nodded slowly. "Elena, can I ask you something personal?" "Sure." "Does your husband often make you feel like your feelings don't matter?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with implications I wasn't sure I was ready to face. It's complicated, I said finally. It always is. Carmen's voice was gentle but firm. But sometimes complicated just means we've learned to make excuses for behavior that shouldn't be excused. Before I could respond, my phone erupted with an incoming call. Marcus. Carmen glanced at the screen and then at my face, noting my instinctive flinch. You don't have to answer that, she said quietly, but I did answer it, because 8 years of conditioning don't disappear overnight. Hello, Marcus. Finally. His voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Do you have any idea what time it is? I've been calling for hours. It's 7:30 in the morning, I said, aware that Carmen was listening but trying not to care. I was sleeping. Sleeping? In that chair again? Elena, this is ridiculous. You need to come home right now. I can't do that. The silence on the other end was so complete I thought the call had dropped. Then Marcus's voice came back, lower and more dangerous than before. What did you just say to me? My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to speak clearly. I said I can't come home right now. My mother is in critical condition. Your mother is unconscious. She doesn't know if you're there or not. But I know you're not here, taking care of your actual responsibilities. Carmen had gone very still beside me, her coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips. Marcus, I need to be here when she wakes up. If she wakes up, he said coldly. And in the meantime, you're destroying my chances with the Henderson dinner. Do you understand how important this is to my career? To our future? Our future. As if I had any say in what that looked like. I understand that you think a dinner party is more important than my mother's life, I heard myself say, and immediately wanted to take the words back. Don't you dare twist this around, Marcus snarled. You're being selfish and dramatic, just like your mother always was. Maybe this stroke will teach you both some respect for what really matters. The words hit me like a physical blow. Carmen's cup rattled against its saucer as she set it down too hard. What did you just say? My voice came out as a whisper. You heard me. Your mother spent her whole life putting her own feelings first, and look where it got her. Alone in a hospital bed. You're heading down the same path if you don't start prioritizing your marriage. I stared at the phone, at this man I'd shared a bed with for 8 years, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The person I'd been yesterday, the woman who would have apologized, who would have rushed home to clean his house and cook his dinner, felt suddenly like a stranger. Elena? Elena, are you there? I'm here, I said, my voice stronger than I'd heard it in years. And I'm staying here until my mother is out of danger. If that's a problem for you, maybe you should think about why impressing your boss matters more to you than supporting your wife. I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking as I set the phone down. Carmen was studying my face with an expression I couldn't quite read. How do you feel? She asked. Terrified, I admitted. He's going to be furious. And, I don't care. The realization surprised me. I should care. I should be worried about his anger, about the consequences he mentioned. But I just don't. That's not a bad thing, Elena. Before I could ask what she meant, Dr. Williams appeared in the doorway with a smile that made my heart leap. Good news, she said, moving to Mom's bedside. Your mother's brain activity increased significantly. Overnight. We're going to try reducing her sedation this morning. What does that mean? I stood up so quickly I knocked over my coffee cup, sending the remaining liquid spilling across the rolling table. It means she might wake up today, Dr. Williams said, beginning her examination. Her body is healing faster than we expected. Carmen had quietly started cleaning up the spilled coffee, giving me space to absorb this news. Mom might wake up today. She might open her eyes and see me here, and know that I hadn't left her side. There are some things we need to discuss, Dr. Williams continued, checking Mom's pupils with a small flashlight. When she wakes up, she may be confused or disoriented. Stroke patients often experience temporary memory issues or difficulty with speech. It's important that she sees familiar faces and hears familiar voices. I'll be here, I said immediately. What about other family members? Her husband, other children? My father died 6 years ago. My sister lives in California, but she's trying to get a flight. I hesitated. My husband thinks I should go home. Dr. Williams' examination paused. She looked at me with the same expression Carmen had worn earlier, professional concern mixing with something more personal. Elena, your mother is going to need consistent support over the next few weeks. Recovery from a stroke isn't just physical, it's emotional and psychological too. Family support is crucial to the healing process. I understand. Do you? Because what I'm hearing is that the most important person in your support system, your husband, isn't supporting this decision. The truth of that statement settled over me like a weight. Marcus wasn't just unsupportive, he was actively working against my being here. He was making my mother's medical crisis about his inconvenience, his needs, his career. Dr. Williams, I said slowly, what would happen if I wasn't here when she woke up? Medically? She'd still recover, assuming no complications. But psychologically? Dr. Williams shook her head. Elena, when stroke patients wake up, they're often frightened and confused. Seeing a loved one's face can be the difference between hope and despair in those first crucial moments. My phone buzzed with a text. Then another. Then it started ringing again. Excuse me, I said, stepping into the hallway to answer. Elena, we need to talk. Marcus's voice was calmer now, but with an edge that made my skin crawl. I'm coming to the hospital. You don't need to do that. Yes, I do. Because clearly you're not thinking straight, and someone needs to help you see reason. Marcus, please don't come here. Not today. I'll be there in an hour. We're going to settle this once and for all. The line went dead. I stood in the hallway, watching doctors and nurses move efficiently past me, and felt the walls of my carefully constructed life beginning to crumble. When I returned to Mom's room, Carmen was adjusting her blankets with gentle efficiency. Everything okay? My husband is coming here. He wants to settle this once and for all. I sank into my chair, suddenly exhausted. Carmen's hands stilled on the blanket. Elena, can I share something with you? I nodded. I've been a nurse for 15 years. I've seen a lot of families deal with medical crises, and I've learned to recognize certain patterns. She sat down across from me, her voice careful but firm. What you've described about your husband's behavior, the anger when you prioritize someone else's needs, the threats of consequences, the way he minimizes your feelings, those are warning signs. Warning signs of what? Emotional abuse. The words hung in the air like a diagnosis I wasn't ready to hear. That's not. Marcus isn't abusive. He's just stressed about work. Stress doesn't excuse cruelty, Elena. And from what I've observed this morning, this isn't about work stress. This is about control. I wanted to argue with her, to defend my marriage and my husband, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I found myself thinking about all the times I'd made excuses for Marcus's behavior, all the ways I'd learned to make myself smaller to avoid his anger. What am I supposed to do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Right now? Nothing. Just stay present for your mother. But Elena, when this crisis is over, you might want to think about what kind of life you're living and whether it's the life you want. Before I could respond, a soft sound from the bed made us both freeze. Mom's eyes were fluttering, and her lips were moving slightly. Get Dr. Williams, Carmen said urgently, moving to Mom's side. I pressed the call button and then took Mom's hand in both of mine. Mom? Mom, it's Elena. Can you hear me? Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then gradually settling on my face. Her lips moved again, and this time I could make out the word Elena. I'm here, Mom. I'm right here. A tear slipped down her cheek as she squeezed my hand weakly. You stayed. Of course I stayed. I love you. Your husband? The words came out slowly, slurred but understandable. I glanced toward the door, knowing Marcus would arrive soon with his demands and ultimatums, and barely contained anger. Then I looked back at Mom's face, at the trust and love I saw there, and made a decision that surprised me. Don't worry about him, I said firmly. Right now, it's just you and me. Mom smiled then, a lopsided but genuine expression that lit up her whole face. Good, she whispered. About time. As Dr. Williams rushed into the room with her team, and as I heard the elevator ding down the hall that probably meant Marcus had arrived, I held my mother's hand and realized that for the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged. The real question was, what would I do when Marcus tried to drag me away from it? The sound of expensive shoes on linoleum announced Marcus's arrival before I saw him. Dr. Williams was still examining Mom, running through basic neurological tests while Carmen monitored her vitals. Mom's responses were slow but encouraging. She could follow simple commands, recognize faces, and speak in short, coherent sentences. Elena. Marcus's voice cut through the medical bustle like a blade. He stood in the doorway wearing his charcoal gray suit, the one that made him look like a successful executive instead of the petty tyrant I was beginning to see clearly. His expression was carefully controlled, but I could see the anger simmering beneath the surface. "Not now, Marcus," I said without looking away from Mom. "She just woke up." "Mrs. Vasquez," Dr. Williams said gently to Mom, "I'm going to step out for a moment to review your test results. Elena, I'll be back in a few minutes to discuss the next steps." Carmen hesitated, glancing between Marcus and me with obvious concern. "I'll be at the nurse's station if you need anything," she said pointedly, her eyes meeting mine. "Anything at all." And then we were alone, Mom, Marcus, and me, in a tension so thick it felt like another presence in the room. "So you're awake," Marcus said to Mom, his voice taking on the artificially warm tone he used with people he wanted to impress. "That's wonderful news." Elena has been beside herself with worry. Mom's eyes, still slightly unfocused but alert, moved between Marcus and me. Even in her weakened state, I could see her processing the undercurrents in the room. "Marcus," I began, but he cut me off with a raised hand. "Elena, we need to talk. Now." He jerked his head toward the hallway. "Privately. I'm not leaving her. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Mom's hand tightened around mine, and when I looked down at her, she shook her head almost imperceptibly. The movement was so slight Marcus missed it, but the message was clear: she didn't want me to go with him. "Whatever you need to say, you can say it here," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. Marcus's carefully controlled expression cracked slightly. "Elena, don't be ridiculous. This is a private matter between husband and wife. My mother just woke up from a stroke. Nothing is more important than that right now." "Nothing?" Marcus stepped closer to the bed, and I caught a whiff of his cologne mixed with something sharper, stress sweat. "What about our marriage? What about my career? What about the life we've built together?" "The life you've built," I corrected. "I've just been maintaining it." The words came out before I could stop them, and I saw Marcus's face flush with anger. Mom squeezed my hand again, this time in what felt like encouragement. "Elena Maria Rodriguez Morrison," Marcus said, using my full married name like a weapon. "I have been patient with you. I have made allowances for your emotional state. But this ends now." "What ends?" "This performance. This dramatic martyrdom. You're embarrassing yourself, and you're embarrassing me." He glanced at Mom as if she weren't there. "Your mother is clearly going to be fine. The crisis is over. It's time to come home and resume your responsibilities." "My responsibilities," I repeated flatly. "Yes. To our home, to our marriage, to my career. The Henderson dinner is tomorrow night, and I will not have my wife's absence jeopardize the most important professional opportunity of my life." "Your wife's absence," I said, tasting the words like something bitter. "Not your wife's presence at her mother's bedside during a medical emergency. Just her absence from your dinner party." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Don't twist my words." "I'm not twisting anything. I'm finally hearing them clearly." Mom made a soft sound that might have been agreement, and Marcus's attention snapped to her for the first time since he'd arrived. Really looked at her, not just acknowledged her presence. "Mrs. Rodriguez," he said, his voice shifting back to that false warmth, "surely you can see that Elena needs to return to her normal life. Her hovering here isn't helping anyone." Mom's response was so quiet I had to lean closer to hear it. "My daughter chooses." "What?" Marcus moved closer, clearly having missed her words. "My daughter chooses," Mom repeated, louder this time. Her speech was still slurred from the stroke, but her meaning was crystal clear. "Not you." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stared at Mom as if she'd spoken in a foreign language, then turned that stare on me. "Elena, your mother, is obviously still confused from the stroke. She doesn't understand the situation." "She understands perfectly," I said, standing up but keeping hold of Mom's hand. "And so do I." "What's that supposed to mean?" I looked at him standing there in his expensive suit, with his perfect hair and his manicured nails and his complete inability to see anyone's needs but his own, and felt the last threads of whatever had bound me to him begin to snap. It means I'm staying here until my mother is released from the hospital. However long that takes. Elena, you're being irrational. No, Marcus. For the first time in 8 years, I'm being rational. His face went through several color changes before settling on a dangerous red. Fine. Fine. If you want to throw away our marriage for this, go ahead. But don't expect me to be waiting when you finally come to your senses. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Mom made another sound, this one distinctly disapproving, and Marcus whirled toward her. This is your fault, he said, abandoning all pretense of politeness. You raised her to be selfish, to put her own wants ahead of her family's needs. Well, congratulations. You've succeeded in destroying your daughter's marriage. Marcus. My voice came out low and dangerous, a tone I'd never used with him before. Don't you ever speak to my mother that way again. Or what? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You'll divorce me? Go ahead, Elena. See how well you do on your own. See how long you last without my income, my insurance, my support. Your support? The laugh that escaped me was harsh and bitter. You mean your constant criticism? Your demands? Your complete indifference to everything that matters to me. I have supported you, when? I interrupted. When have you ever supported me? When I wanted to go back to school. You said it was a waste of money. When I wanted to volunteer at the literacy center. You said it interfered with your schedule. When I suggested we try couples therapy. You said I was being dramatic. Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but I wasn't finished. And now, when my mother, Marcus, has a stroke, you're angry that I'm here instead of home preparing for your dinner party. When exactly do my needs matter? When do my feelings count? Your feelings, Marcus said coldly, have always been your problem, Elena. The world doesn't revolve around what you want. No, I said quietly, it revolves around what you want. And I've been so busy trying to keep you happy that I forgot I was supposed to matter too. Mom squeezed my hand again, and when I looked down, I saw tears on her cheeks. But her eyes were bright with something that looked like pride. Marcus stared at both of us, his face cycling through anger, disbelief, and something that might have been genuine confusion. I don't understand what's happening here. I know you don't, I said, and for the first time, I felt sorry for him instead of afraid. That's the problem. Carmen appeared in the doorway with perfect timing, as if she'd been waiting for the right moment to intervene. Excuse me, but visiting hours for non-family members end in 5 minutes. Marcus turned his attention to her, and I saw his expression shift into the charming smile he used on service workers and subordinates. I'm her husband. I'm family. Are you listed as Mrs. Rodriguez's emergency contact? Carmen asked innocently. She's my mother-in-law. I see. Well, the patient seems to be getting agitated. Carmen looked pointedly at Mom, who had indeed begun to show signs of distress, elevated heart rate on the monitor, restless movements. We need to keep her environment as calm as possible during this critical recovery period. Marcus, I said, you should go. Elena, please. Just go home. We'll talk later. For a moment, I thought he might refuse, might try to force a confrontation right there in Mom's hospital room. But something in my face must have convinced him that he wouldn't win this battle. This isn't over, he said quietly, pulling out his phone. I'm calling my lawyer. After he left, the room seemed to expand, as if his presence had been sucking all the air out of it. Carmen immediately began checking Mom's vitals, her movements efficient and soothing. Are you okay? She asked. Me without looking up from the blood pressure cuff. I don't know, I admitted. He said he's calling his lawyer. Divorce lawyer? Probably. Carmen finished her examination and made notes on Mom's chart. How do you feel about that? I thought about the question seriously. How did I feel about the possibility that my marriage was ending? About the threat of being on my own for the first time since college? Scared, I said finally. But also what? Relieved. Carmen nodded as if this was exactly what she'd expected to hear. Elena, can I ask you something else? Sure. Do you have somewhere safe to stay? Friends, family, resources? The question hit me like cold water. In all my years with Marcus, I'd gradually lost touch with most of my college friends. The few relationships I'd maintained were more like acquaintanceships, women I saw at book club or the grocery store, not people I could call in a crisis. I have my sister in California, I said slowly. And there's my mom's house, but I don't know if I can afford to maintain it on my own. What about work? Do you have a job? Part-time at the library. It's not much, but... I trailed off, remembering something I'd almost forgotten. Actually, there might be more opportunities there. My supervisor mentioned a full-time position opening up, but I told her I couldn't commit because of Marcus's schedule. His schedule? He travels for work sometimes, and he expects me to be available when he's home. He says it's more important for me to focus on being a good wife than building a career. Carmen's expression grew carefully neutral, the way it had when she'd first brought up the subject of emotional abuse. And what do you think? Before I could answer, Mom spoke up, her voice stronger than it had been all day. Elena, brilliant. Always, brilliant. I looked down at her, surprised by the clarity in her eyes despite her slurred speech. Valedictorian, she continued, struggling with the word but determined to get it out. Full scholarship. Remember? I did remember. I'd graduated magna cum laude with a degree in library science and a minor in Spanish literature. I'd had dreams of running my own library, maybe writing children's books on the side. When had I stopped believing I was capable of those things? Your mother's right, Carmen said gently. You strike me as someone who's capable of a lot more than she's been allowed to do. Allowed, I repeated, tasting the word. I allowed myself to be diminished. Maybe. But the important thing is recognizing it. And deciding what you want to do about it. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Patricia Morrison. Marcus told me about your behavior at the hospital. You should be ashamed of yourself. A good wife would never abandon her husband during an important career opportunity. You're selfish and ungrateful, and you're embarrassing our family name. I showed the text to Carmen, who read it with an expression of disgust. Block the number, she said firmly. She's my mother-in-law. She's someone who thinks it's appropriate to attack you during a family medical crisis. Block the number. I hesitated for only a moment before following her advice. The action felt small but significant, like the first crack in a dam. Elena? Mom's voice was getting tired, but she was still fighting to stay alert. Proud of you. For what, Mom? Standing up. Finally. Dr. Williams returned with Mom's test results, which were encouraging enough that they began discussing discharge plans. Mom would need physical therapy, speech therapy, and close monitoring, but she could potentially go home within the week if she continued to improve. She'll need someone to stay with her initially, Dr. Williams explained. At least for the first month. Are you available to do that, Elena? I thought about Marcus's ultimatum, about the Henderson dinner party tomorrow night, about the choice I was being forced to make between my mother's needs and my husband's demands. Yes, I said without hesitation. I'll be there. As evening fell and visiting hours ended, I prepared to spend another night in the hospital chair despite Carmen's gentle protests about getting proper rest. Marcus hadn't called or texted since. His threat about the lawyer, which was somehow more ominous than his earlier bombardment of messages. Elena, Mom said as I settled in for the night. Her speech was getting clearer with each hour that passed. What will you do? About what? Marcus. Marriage. I looked out the window at the city lights twinkling in the darkness, thinking about the woman I'd been when I walked into this hospital 3 days ago and the woman I was becoming in this chair. I don't know yet, I admitted. But I know I can't go back to being who I was before. Mom smiled, and even lopsided from the stroke, it was the most beautiful thing I'd seen in years. Good, she whispered. Time to fly. As I drifted off to an uneasy sleep, I wondered if I even remembered how I woke to the sound of hushed voices in the hallway outside Mom's room. Dawn was breaking through the windows, painting everything in soft gray light. Mom was still sleeping peacefully, her breathing steady and strong. The improvement in just 24 hours was remarkable. Elena? Carmen peeked around the doorframe. There's someone here to see you. Says she's your sister? My heart leaped. Rosa? She made it? But the woman who followed Carmen into the room wasn't Rosa. She was older, maybe 50, with steel-gray hair and tired eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She carried herself with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to handling difficult situations. "Ms. Rodriguez? I'm Helen Martinez from Adult Protective Services." The words hit me like ice water. Adult Protective Services? I don't understand. We received a complaint yesterday regarding the care of Maria Rodriguez. Helen's voice was professional, but not unkind. "May I sit down?" I nodded, my mind racing. Who would have called APS? And why? According to the complaint, Mrs. Rodriguez is being kept in unsafe conditions by a family member who may be financially exploiting her. Helen pulled out a tablet and began scrolling through notes. The caller was quite concerned about potential elder abuse. Elder abuse? I stared at her. That's impossible. I've been here since the moment she arrived. I haven't left her side. The complaint specifically mentioned that Mrs. Rodriguez's primary caregiver is experiencing domestic issues that may compromise her ability to provide appropriate care. Helen looked up from her tablet. It also suggested that you might be using your mother's medical crisis to avoid your own responsibilities. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. "Marcus," I whispered. "I'm sorry. My husband. He called you, didn't he?" Helen's expression remained neutral. "I can't reveal the identity of the complainant. However, I am required to investigate all reports of potential elder abuse." Carmen, who had been quietly checking Mom's vitals, turned sharply. "This is ridiculous. Elena hasn't left this room except to shower. She's been nothing but devoted to her mother. I appreciate your input, but I need to conduct my own assessment." Helen turned back to me. "Ms. Rodriguez, I need to ask you some questions about your mother's care, her finances, and your living situation." For the next hour, Helen grilled me about everything from Mom's bank accounts to her medication schedule to my own mental state. The questions grew increasingly invasive, clearly designed to uncover signs of neglect or exploitation. "Your mother owns her home outright?" Helen asked, consulting her notes. "Yes. Dad paid off the mortgage before he died." "And who has access to her financial accounts?" "I have power of attorney for medical decisions only. Her financial affairs are handled by her attorney, Mr. Gomez." "What about insurance? Life insurance?" I frowned. "I'm not sure. Why would that matter?" The complainant suggested you might have financial motivations for encouraging your mother to remain hospitalized longer than necessary. The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed. "You think I want her to stay sick? You think I'm enjoying sitting in this chair for 4 days, watching machines keep her alive?" "Some family members do find ways to benefit from extended medical situations," Helen said carefully. "Insurance payouts, disability claims, access to assets, that's enough." Mom's voice, weak but clear, cut through the interrogation. We all turned to see her eyes open, alert and angry. "My daughter hasn't left my side. Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm Helen Martinez from Adult Protective Services. I'm here to make sure you're receiving appropriate care." "I am." Mom's speech was getting stronger by the hour. "From Elena. Only Elena. Ma'am, we received a report that your daughter might not be able to provide adequate care due to personal issues." Mom struggled to sit up higher in bed, and I moved quickly to adjust her pillows. Her eyes never left Helen's face. "Who called you?" "I can't reveal that information." "My son-in-law," Mom said flatly. "Has to be angry that Elena won't leave me." Helen's careful neutrality cracked slightly. "Mrs. Rodriguez, if someone is pressuring you to accept inadequate care, no." Mom's voice was getting stronger, more forceful. "Someone pressuring my daughter to abandon me. Different thing." Dr. Williams chose that moment to arrive for morning rounds, taking in the scene with obvious confusion. "Is everything all right here?" "Dr. Williams," Helen said, standing. "I'm from APS. We're investigating a complaint about Mrs. Rodriguez's care. Can you tell me about her medical status and prognosis?" "Mrs. Rodriguez is recovering remarkably well. Her daughter has been exemplary in her advocacy and support. I've rarely seen such dedicated family involvement." Dr. Williams looked puzzled. "May I ask what prompted this investigation?" "A concerned family member reported potential neglect." Dr. Williams' expression hardened. I can assure you there has been no neglect. If anything, Elena's presence has been crucial to her mother's recovery. Stroke patients with strong family support consistently show better outcomes. The complainant suggested the daughter might be prolonging the hospital stay for personal gain. That's absurd, Dr. Williams said bluntly. We've been encouraging Mrs. Rodriguez to go home as soon as possible. It's Elena who's been asking all the right questions about follow-up care and safety measures. Carmen stepped forward. I've been Mrs. Rodriguez's primary nurse for 3 days. Elena has been nothing but attentive, informed, and appropriate. If anyone is compromising Mrs. Rodriguez's care, it's whoever is trying to pull her daughter away during this critical period. Helen looked around the room, clearly realizing her investigation wasn't yielding the results someone had hoped for. Mrs. Rodriguez, do you feel safe with your daughter as your primary caregiver? Safer than anywhere else, Mom said firmly. Elena is, good daughter. Good woman. Someone trying to hurt her. Who is trying to hurt her? Mom looked directly at me, her eyes sad but resolute. Tell her, Mija. Time for truth. My throat felt tight. My husband filed this complaint because I won't come home to host his dinner party. Helen blinked. I'm sorry. He has an important business dinner tonight. He wants me to leave my mother in the hospital so I can cook and clean and play hostess. The words came out flat and emotionless. When I refused, he threatened me. Yesterday he said he was calling his lawyer. I guess he called you too. Someone called APS to force you to abandon a stroke patient so you could attend a dinner party? Helen's professional composure was slipping. Not just any dinner party. One that might help his career. In his mind, that's more important than my mother's life. Helen sat back down, her expression troubled. Ms. Rodriguez, are you in a safe domestic situation? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Carmen moved closer, her presence supportive but not pressuring. Dr. Williams waited quietly. Mom watched me with eyes full of love and concern. I don't know, I said finally. I thought I was. But the last few days have shown me things about my marriage that I didn't want to see. What kind of things? I thought about Marcus's anger when I couldn't be reached, his threats about consequences, his complete inability to understand why I would prioritize my mother's medical emergency over his career needs. He's very controlling, I said slowly. He monitors my schedule, my activities, my relationships. I haven't had a close friend in years because he always finds fault with them. I stopped pursuing interests he didn't approve of. I gave up career opportunities because they didn't fit his timeline. Has he ever been physically violent? No. Not physically. But I paused, struggling to articulate something I'd never said aloud. He makes me feel small. Stupid. Like my thoughts and feelings don't matter unless they align with his needs. Helen was taking notes now, her entire demeanor changed. Ms. Rodriguez, would you be interested in speaking with a domestic violence counselor? I'm not being abused, I said automatically, then stopped. I mean, it's not like what you see on TV. Abuse comes in many forms, Helen said gently. Emotional, psychological, financial control, these can be just as damaging as physical violence. Carmen sat down beside me. Elena, yesterday you flinched when your husband called. You were terrified of making him angry. That's not normal. Marital dynamics. But he's never hit me. Physical violence isn't the only way to control someone, Dr. Williams said quietly. I've seen many patients whose stress-related illnesses stem from emotional abuse at home. Mom reached for my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Elena, remember when you were little? Remember what you wanted to be? I smiled despite the tears starting to form. A librarian who wrote children's books. Smart, strong, independent. What happened to that girl? The answer was complicated and simple at the same time. That girl had gradually disappeared, piece by piece, under the weight of Marcus's expectations and criticisms. She'd been eroded away so slowly I hadn't noticed until there was almost nothing left. She learned to be quiet, I whispered. Time to remember her voice, Mom said firmly. Helen closed her tablet and stood up. Ms. Rodriguez, I'm going to close this case as unfounded. Your mother is receiving excellent care, and there are no signs of abuse or neglect. However, I'm going to leave you with some resources for domestic violence support, just in case you ever need them. After Helen left, the room felt different. Lighter somehow, but also charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Elena, Dr. Williams said, your mother should be able to go home tomorrow if she continues improving at this rate. Will you be able to stay with her? Yes, I said without hesitation. What about your husband's reaction to that decision? I thought about Marcus's threat to call his lawyer, about Patricia's nasty text message, about the APS investigation designed to force me back into compliance. I'll deal with whatever comes, I said, and meant it. Carmen squeezed my shoulder. You're stronger than you think. How do you know? Because you're still here. Despite the pressure, the threats, the manipulation, you're still here, doing what you know is right. That takes courage. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is ridiculous, Elena. Cancel this tantrum and come home immediately. The Hendersons will be here in 6 hours. Marcus' eyes showed the message to Carmen, who shook her head in disgust. He's using a burner phone now? That's escalation behavior. What do you mean? When abusers start using tactics like fake APS reports and untraceable communications, it usually means they're losing control and getting desperate. Carmen's expression was serious. Elena, you need to be careful. When controlling people feel their power slipping away, they can become unpredictable. You think he's dangerous? I think he's a man who's used to getting his way, and you're no longer giving it to him. That can make people do stupid things. Dr. Williams nodded agreement. Elena, when you take your mother home, make sure someone knows where you are and checks on you regularly. And consider changing the locks. Changing the locks? But it's his house too. Is it? Dr. Williams asked gently. Who pays the mortgage? Whose name is on the deed? I opened my mouth to say we both do, and realized I didn't actually know. Marcus handled all the finances. I had access to a household account for groceries and small expenses, but the mortgage, insurance, major bills, those were all his domain. I don't know, I admitted. That's another form of control, Carmen said. Financial isolation. Making sure you don't know enough about your own situation to feel confident leaving. Mom squeezed my hand again. Elena, you have bank account? From before? I nodded. A small savings account from my job at the library. Marcus doesn't know about it. I'd kept it secret, telling myself it was just practical to have some independence. Now I realized it might be a lifeline. How much? Mom asked. About $3,000. Enough to start over? The question terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. Start over. At 35, after 8 years of marriage, could I really start over? Maybe, I said softly. My phone rang. Marcus again, calling from his regular number this time. I declined the call, but immediately it started ringing again. Turn it off, Carmen advised. You don't owe him access to you 24/7. I powered down the phone, and the sudden silence felt like freedom. Elena, Mom said, time to choose. Stay small or grow big. I looked around the room at these 3 women who barely knew me but had shown me more respect and support in 4 days than my husband had in 8 years. At my mother, fighting her way back from a stroke because she had things left to say. At the choice that was no longer a choice but a necessity. I choose big, I said, my voice steady for the first time in years. The question was, would Marcus let me go peacefully, or would he fight for a prize he'd never really valued, based on the APS investigation and the burner phone? I suspected I already knew the answer. The hospital discharge papers felt surreal in my hands. After 5 days of living in limbo, Mom was finally coming home. Her recovery had been nothing short of miraculous. Her speech was nearly back to normal, her cognitive function sharp, and her physical therapy assessments promising. Dr. Williams had called her a textbook example of successful stroke recovery with proper family support. Ready, Mom? I asked, helping her into the wheelchair for the mandatory ride to the hospital exit. More than ready, Mija. She patted my hand, then looked up at me with eyes that held a new intensity. But are you ready for what comes next? I wasn't sure what she meant until we pulled into her driveway and I saw Marcus's BMW parked there, gleaming black against the modest suburban backdrop of Mom's neighborhood. My stomach clenched with familiar dread. He's here, I whispered, my courage from the hospital suddenly feeling very far away. Good, Mom said firmly. Time to, how do you say, clear the air. Carmen had insisted on driving us home in her own car, citing concerns about my stress levels and Mom's safety. Now I was grateful for her presence as we helped Mom up the front steps. Through the living room window, I could see Marcus pacing, his phone pressed to his ear. Elena, Carmen said quietly, remember what we talked about. You don't have to engage with manipulation. You don't have to justify your choices to someone who refuses to respect them. I nodded, fumbling with my keys. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped them twice before managing to unlock the door. Marcus was off the phone immediately, striding toward us with an expression I'd never seen before, part desperation, part fury, and something else that looked almost like panic. Elena. Thank God. We need to talk right now. Help me get Mom settled first, I said, but he stepped directly into our path. No. We've wasted enough time on this melodrama. The Hendersons are expecting us in 3 hours, and we have a crisis to discuss. Crisis? I helped Mom to her favorite recliner, Carmen hovering protectively nearby. My lawyer says the APS complaint backfired. Apparently, you've been painting me as some kind of monster. Marcus's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. Do you have any idea what this could do to my reputation? To my career? Mom settled into her chair with a small grunt of effort, then fixed Marcus with a stare that could have melted steel. Reputation, she repeated slowly. Interesting word choice. Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm glad you're feeling better, but this is between Elena and me. Wrong, Mom said with startling firmness. This about respect. Something you know nothing about. Marcus's face flushed red. I have always respected Elena. I've provided for her, protected her, given her a life most women would envy. Provided. What? Carmen asked quietly, and I realized she'd positioned herself between Marcus and the rest of us. Security? Support? Understanding? I'm sorry, who are you again? Marcus turned his attention to Carmen with the dismissive tone he used on people he considered beneath him. I'm Elena's friend. And I'm a mandated reporter who's witnessed some very concerning behavior over the past few days. Concerning behavior? Marcus laughed, but it sounded forced. Elena had a breakdown because her mother got sick. I tried to help her maintain perspective. Perspective. I repeated, finding my voice. You mean your perspective? Your priorities? Your needs? Our needs, Elena. Our life, our marriage, our future. He moved closer, and I instinctively stepped back. You're throwing all of that away for what? To play nurse to a woman who's going to be fine. To be present for someone I love during the scariest time of her life, I corrected. Something you apparently can't understand. What I understand is that you've been manipulated. Marcus's voice took on the patronizing tone that used to make me feel stupid. By her, by these strangers who filled your head with nonsense about abuse. Elena, you're not thinking clearly. Actually, I said, surprised by how calm I sounded, I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. Really? Because from where I stand, you've lost your mind. You missed the most important dinner party of my career. You had the state investigate me for elder abuse. You've been telling strangers that I'm controlling and manipulative. His voice was rising with each word. Do you have any idea what this is costing me? What it's costing you? The words came out sharp as broken glass. Marcus, my mother almost died. She had a stroke, was unconscious for days, and could have suffered permanent brain damage. And you're worried about a dinner party? It wasn't just a dinner party, and you know it. This promotion could change everything for us. For you, I corrected. It could change everything for you. What about what I want? What about my career, my dreams, my choices? Marcus stared at me as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. Your dreams? Elena, you're 35 years old. You work part-time. At a library. What dreams? The casual cruelty of those words hit me like a physical blow. Carmen made a small sound of outrage, and Mom's hands gripped the arms of her recliner. The dreams you convinced me to give up, I said quietly. The master's degree program you said was too expensive. The full-time position you said would interfere with your travel schedule. The writing classes you said were a waste of time. I was protecting you from disappointment. You're not. He paused, seeming to realize he was about to cross a line even he recognized as dangerous. I'm not what, Marcus? Not smart enough? Not talented enough? Not worth investing in? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? The silence stretched between us, filled with 8 years of accumulated resentment and unspoken truths. Marcus looked around the room, at Mom watching him with undisguised disapproval, at Carmen's protective stance, at me standing straighter than he'd seen me stand in years. Elena, come home with me. Now. We'll forget this whole thing happened. And we'll move forward. And if I don't? His expression shifted, becoming cold and calculating. Then you'll regret it. I've already filed papers to have our joint accounts frozen pending a psychological evaluation. My lawyer says your behavior this week demonstrates clear mental instability. The threat hit the room like a bomb. Carmen stepped forward, her voice deadly quiet. Did you just threaten to have Elena declared mentally incompetent because she wouldn't abandon her stroke victim mother? I'm protecting our assets from someone who's clearly not making rational decisions. Our assets? I laughed, and the sound was bitter. Marcus, I don't even know what our assets are. You've never let me see a bank statement, a mortgage document, an insurance policy. How can I protect something I don't know exists? That's how marriage works, Elena. I handle the finances, you handle the home. That's how control works, Carmen said bluntly. Financial abuse is still abuse. Marcus whirled on her. You need to leave. This is a private family matter. No, Mom said, her voice stronger than it had been since the stroke. She stays. You leave. Mrs. Rodriguez, with all due respect, this is between Elena and me. With all due respect, Mom said, standing up from her chair with careful determination, you have no respect. Not for Elena, not for marriage, not for human decency. Marcus's face went through several color changes. Elena, control your mother. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Control your mother. As if she were a pet that had misbehaved instead of a woman with her own voice and choices. I don't control anyone, I said slowly. That's the difference between us. Elena, last chance. Come home with me now, and we can fix this. Stay here. And I promise you'll regret it for the rest of your life. I looked at him standing there in his expensive suit, with his perfect hair and his manicured nails and his complete inability to see anyone's needs but his own. This man I'd shared a bed with for 8 years, who'd never once asked what I wanted or needed or dreamed about. Who'd gradually convinced me I was smaller and weaker and less capable than I knew myself to be. Marcus, I said, my voice steady and clear, I want a divorce. The words seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Marcus stared at me as if I'd slapped him. You don't mean that. I've never meant anything more in my life. Elena, you're upset. You're not thinking clearly. You need me. You can't survive on your own. Watch me. For a moment, I thought he might try to physically force me to leave with him. His hands clenched into fists, his breathing became rapid and shallow, and something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Then Carmen stepped forward, her phone in her hand. Marcus, I've been recording this conversation. All of it. The threats, the financial manipulation, the attempts to have Elena declared mentally incompetent for caring for her mother. Do you really want to escalate this situation? Marcus looked at the phone, then at Carmen's calm, professional expression, then at Mom sitting in her chair with fierce dignity despite her recent medical trauma. Finally, his gaze settled on me. You'll regret this, Elena. When you're living in poverty, struggling to pay bills, realizing what you've thrown away, you'll regret this. Maybe, I said. But I'll regret it as myself, not as the woman you tried to turn me into. He stared at me for a long moment, then pulled out his phone and made a call. Patricia? It's done. She's chosen her mother over her marriage. Yes, I know. I'll be there in an hour. After he hung up, he looked around the room one more time. Elena, I'm filing for divorce on grounds of abandonment and mental instability. My lawyer says I can probably get the house and most of our assets, especially given your recent behavior. Good luck with that, Carmen said cheerfully. I'm sure a judge will be very interested in a man who tried to force his wife to abandon her stroke victim mother for a dinner party. Marcus's confident expression faltered slightly. You don't know what you're talking about. Actually, I do. I work with domestic violence cases regularly. I know exactly what this looks like, and so will any family court judge worth their degree. For the first time since he'd arrived, Marcus looked uncertain. He'd built his threats on the assumption that I was isolated, dependent, and too broken down to fight back. He hadn't counted on witnesses, documentation, or the possibility that I might choose myself over his vision of what I should be. "This isn't over," he said finally, heading toward the door. "Yes, it is," I called after him. "It's been over for years. I just finally had the courage to admit it." After the door slammed behind him, the three of us sat in silence for several minutes. Outside, I heard his BMW roar to life and speed away, probably to his mother's house where he would spin this story into another example of how ungrateful and selfish I was. "How do you feel?" Carmen asked gently. I took inventory of my emotions, expecting to find terror, regret, maybe even relief. Instead, I found something I hadn't felt in years: peace. "Free," I said, and meant it. Terrified, but free. Mom reached for my hand, her grip strong and sure. "Proud of you, Mija. So very proud." "Mom, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't have money, or a place to live, or even a full-time job." "You have yourself," she said firmly. "You have your brain, your heart, your strength. You have people who love you, real love, not control." She squeezed my hand. "And you have time to remember who you really are." Carmen sat down on the couch across from us. "Elena, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What do you want? Not what you think you should want, not what would be practical or safe or easy. What do you actually want for your life?" The question was so simple and so impossible. When was the last time anyone had asked me what I wanted? "I want to finish my master's degree," I said slowly, the words feeling strange and wonderful in my mouth. "I want to run a library program for adult literacy. I want to write children's books about brave girls who save themselves." I paused, surprised by how clear the vision was becoming. "I want to wake up in the morning and not be afraid of making someone angry just by existing." "Those are good wants," Mom said softly. "Important wants. But Marcus was right about one thing: I can't afford those wants. Not on library wages." Carmen smiled. "Elena, you've been thinking like someone who has no options. But you have more resources than you realize." "What do you mean?" "You have 8 years of marriage to a man who earns a substantial income. You have a right to spousal support, especially if you can prove financial abuse. You have a college degree and work experience. You have people who believe in you." Carmen leaned forward. "Most importantly, you have something Marcus will never have: the courage to change." Outside, the sun was setting, painting Mom's living room in shades of gold and rose. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and paperwork and the messy business of disentangling a life I'd thought was permanent. But tonight, for the first time in years, I felt like myself. "Elena," Mom said as Carmen prepared to leave, "remember what I told you when you were little? About butterflies?" I smiled, remembering. "You said they have to dissolve completely in the cocoon before they can become something new." "Dissolution," Mom nodded. "Scary word. But necessary, for transformation." As I helped her get ready for bed, her first night home from the hospital, I thought about dissolution and transformation, about the woman I'd been and the woman I was becoming. The process was terrifying and necessary in equal measure, but for the first time in 8 years, I was choosing my own metamorphosis. 3 months later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of Mom's kitchen as I sat at the familiar oak table, grading papers from my new position as the adult literacy coordinator at the county library system. Mom was in the garden, tending to the tomatoes she'd insisted on planting despite Dr. Williams' initial concerns about physical exertion. Her recovery had been complete, more than complete, actually. She seemed stronger and more vibrant than she'd been in years. "Elena," she called through the open window, her voice bright and clear. "Rose is here." I looked up to see my sister's rental car pulling into the driveway. She'd been visiting monthly since Mom's stroke, each time marveling at how different I seemed. Today was special, though. It was the day my divorce would be finalized. Rosa burst through the kitchen door with her characteristic energy, arms already open for a hug. "How's my brave little sister feeling today?" "Nervous," I admitted, accepting her embrace. "But good nervous." "Any word from Marcus's camp?" I shook my head. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind of legal proceedings, but Marcus had ultimately accepted a settlement that was far more favorable to me than he'd initially threatened. His lawyer had apparently explained that trying to paint a woman as mentally unstable for caring for her stroke victim mother wouldn't play well in court, especially with Carmen's recordings and the APS investigation backfiring so spectacularly. He signed everything yesterday, I said, pulling out the paperwork. The house goes to him, but I get half the retirement accounts and spousal support for 2 years. It's enough to finish my master's degree. And the master's program? I smiled, remembering the call I'd received just 2 weeks ago. Full acceptance to the library science graduate program at State. I start in the fall. Rosa hooped with joy, spinning me around the kitchen like we were children again. Elena, I'm so proud of you. Careful, Mom said, coming in from the garden with a basket of tomatoes. Don't want another medical emergency. Her speech was completely normal now, but she occasionally paused for emphasis. A habit she'd developed since the stroke. Dr. Williams said it was common for patients to become more deliberate in their communication, choosing their words with greater care. How are you feeling about today, Mom? I asked. She set down the basket and looked at me with eyes that held depths of wisdom I was still discovering. Grateful, she said simply. Grateful that you found your voice before it was too late. We spent the morning cleaning the house and cooking, a routine that had become precious to me over the past 3 months. Living with Mom again had been an adjustment, but it had also been healing in ways I hadn't expected. We talked about things we'd never discussed, her dreams she'd set aside when she became a mother, her regrets about not pushing me harder to pursue my goals, her pride in watching me rebuild my life from the ground up. At noon, Carmen arrived with a bottle of champagne and a huge grin. She'd become one of my closest friends, helping me navigate everything from therapy sessions to job interviews to the practical matters of disentangling my life from Marcus's final divorce decree in hand, she asked, settling into Mom's living room with familiar ease. I nodded, pulling the document from my purse. Signed, sealed, and delivered. As of 2 p.m. today, I'm officially a free woman. How does it feel? I considered the question seriously. 3 months ago, I'd been terrified of being alone, convinced I couldn't survive without Marcus's income and direction. Now, sitting in Mom's living room surrounded by women who loved and supported me, the idea of being alone felt like a gift. It feels like coming home to myself, I said finally. Rosa raised her glass of iced tea in a mock toast. To Elena, who taught us all what real courage looks like. To Mom, I countered, who showed me that it's never too late to fight for what matters. To friendship, Carmen added, and the power of women supporting women. To second chances. Mom concluded, her voice warm with emotion. We drank our toast just as the doorbell rang. I froze, my first instinct still being fear that Marcus had come to create one final scene. But when I opened the door, I found a delivery man with an enormous bouquet of flowers. Elena Rodriguez? That's me. He handed over the flowers, a stunning arrangement of sunflowers, daisies, and white roses. The card read, "Congratulations on your new beginning. You inspire all of us. The Reynolds Technology Women's Professional Network." I stared at the card in confusion. Reynolds Technology? I don't know anyone there. Carmen read the card over my shoulder and smiled mysteriously. Actually, you do. Remember when I told you I work with domestic violence cases regularly? Well, I also do consulting for companies trying to improve their workplace culture. You work for Reynolds Technology. I do diversity and inclusion training there. When I shared your story, anonymously, of course, with our women's professional group, they were so moved that they wanted to do something. You've become sort of a symbol of courage for women who are in similar situations. Rosa looked between us with growing excitement. Elena, what is she talking about? Carmen pulled out her phone and showed us a screenshot of a company newsletter. The headline read, "Local Woman's Journey Inspires Workplace Culture Change." Below it was a photo of me from the library's website, alongside an article about my new position as adult literacy coordinator. How did they get this? I asked, still confused. Your supervisor at the library, Mrs. Henderson, is married to Tom Henderson, the department head at Reynolds Technology. When she heard about your situation and your new position, she shared it with the Women's Network as an example of someone who rebuilt her life after leaving an abusive marriage. My mouth fell open. Mrs. Henderson? But her husband, he was at the dinner party Marcus wanted me to host. The very same dinner party, Carmen confirmed. Apparently, when Marcus showed up alone and spent the evening complaining about his ungrateful wife abandoning him for a minor medical emergency, it made quite an impression. Tom Henderson was not pleased to learn that one of his employees had tried to force his wife to abandon her stroke victim mother. Rosa began laughing so hard she nearly spilled her drink. You mean Marcus's big career opportunity was ruined by his own behavior? It gets better, Carmen continued. Marcus was passed over for the promotion specifically because Tom Henderson questioned his judgment and character. The position went to a woman who had impressed everyone by covering Marcus's responsibilities when he was distracted by personal issues during Mom's hospitalization. I sat down heavily, overwhelmed by the irony. Marcus had sacrificed his marriage and my well-being for a career opportunity that his own actions had destroyed. There's more, Carmen said gently. The Women's Network has been following your story, and they've established a small scholarship fund for women pursuing advanced degrees after leaving abusive relationships. You're the first recipient. She handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a letter of encouragement, signed by dozens of women I'd never met but who somehow understood my journey. I can't accept this, I whispered, but Mom reached over and closed my hands around the check. You can, she said firmly. Because accepting help isn't the same as being helpless. It's what strong women do, for each other. The afternoon passed in a blur of phone calls, tears, and planning. The scholarship money, combined with my savings and the divorce settlement, would be enough to cover my master's degree and living expenses. For the first time in years, I could see a clear path forward that was entirely my own choosing. As evening approached, Carmen and Rosa prepared to leave. Mom had insisted on cooking dinner for everyone, and we'd spent hours around the kitchen table talking about everything and nothing, the kind of easy, supportive conversation I'd forgotten was possible. Elena, Rosa said as she gathered her things, I need to tell you something. I was so angry at you for staying in that marriage as long as you did. I could see how unhappy you were, but every time I tried to talk to you about it, you defended him. I know, I said quietly. I was angry at myself too. But watching you these past 3 months, seeing how you've rebuilt your life from nothing, I understand now that you had to be ready. You had to find your own strength before you could use it. Carmen nodded agreement. That's the thing about transformation, it can't be forced from the outside. It has to come from within, when you're finally ready to face the truth about your life. After they left, Mom and I sat on the front porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. The evening air was warm, filled with the sound of crickets and the distant laughter of children playing in the neighborhood. Mom, I said, can I ask you something? Always. That day in the hospital when Marcus said maybe the stroke would teach you respect, were you awake? Did you hear him? Mom was quiet for so long I thought she might not answer. Then she reached over and took my hand. I heard everything, she said softly. Every cruel word, every threat, every time he made you feel small. She squeezed my hand. But I also heard you, finding your voice. Standing up. Choosing love over fear. I was so scared. Good scared or bad scared? I thought about it. Both. I was terrified of being alone, of not having enough money, of failing. But I was also scared of staying small forever, of never knowing who I could become if I was brave enough to try. And now? I looked around at the life I was building, Mom's house where I felt safe and valued, the job that challenged and fulfilled me, the friends who supported my growth instead of demanding my diminishment, the future that stretched ahead full of possibilities I was finally free to explore. Now I'm excited, I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. For the first time in years, I'm excited about tomorrow. Mom smiled, and in the fading light, she looked exactly like the woman who had raised me to believe I could do anything. Before I'd learned to doubt myself, before I'd accepted less than I deserved, before I'd forgotten that my dreams mattered too. Elena, she said, what do you think? Marcus learned from all this? I considered the question seriously. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that Marcus was struggling, professionally isolated after the dinner party incident, personally bitter about the divorce settlement, socially diminished by his own behavior becoming public knowledge. I don't think he learned anything, I said finally. I think he's still angry that the world didn't conform to his expectations. Still convinced that everyone else is wrong and he's the victim. And you? What did you learn? The question was so simple and so complex. What had I learned from Mom's stroke, from Marcus's cruelty, from my own long journey back to myself? I learned that respect isn't something you can demand or force, I said slowly. It's something you earn by how you treat others when they're vulnerable. I learned that love isn't control, it's freedom. And I learned that it's never too late to remember who you really are. Mom nodded, satisfied. Good lessons. Important lessons. As the last light faded from the sky, I thought about Marcus's words that day in the hospital, maybe the stroke will teach you respect. He'd meant it as a threat, a cruel suggestion that suffering would humble me into compliance. Instead, Mom's stroke had taught me something far more valuable, that life is fragile and precious, that time with the people we love is irreplaceable. And that some things are worth fighting for no matter the cost. It had taught me to respect myself. Ready to go in? Mom asked, but I shook my head. 5 more minutes, I said, not ready to leave this perfect moment. I want to watch the stars. Come out. We sat in comfortable silence as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell chimed 8 o'clock. Tomorrow I would start my master's program. Next month I would move into my own apartment. Next year I would graduate and begin the career I'd always dreamed of, but tonight, I was exactly where I belonged, beside my mother, under the vast sky, finally free to become whoever I was meant to be. Maybe the stroke had taught me respect. After all. Just not the kind Marcus had intended. It had taught me to respect my own strength, my own worth, and my own right to choose a life filled with love instead of fear.